Hello and welcome to the Car Care Reviews channel, and welcome to the 2024 Ford Ranger. All new for 2024. And in today's video, we're going to do a proper technical review under the hood. We're going to take a look underneath it, inside and out, some things we like, some things we do not like, right after this. Let's start our technical review under the hood. So there are two possible engine options in the 2024 Ford Ranger. The first one is actually a carryover from the previous generation, which is this one, the 2.3 liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder. And then there is an optional 2.7 liter V6 turbo. In all fairness, we tried to get a hold of the 2.7 just to take it for a test drive and see what's what. We could not do that, so we will not be commenting on the 2.7 V6 until we drive one. Maybe in the future we will get one and we'll talk about it. So we're going to focus heavily on the 2.3 liter 4-cylinder turbo. So this engine is 4-cylinder turbo, direct injection only. Let's start with the mechanical construction. At the very top, you have a plastic valve cover. Underneath that, you have a single piece cylinder head with no hydraulic lifters. This has buckets. Very old design. I mean, it works, but you do have valve adjustments down the road, so there is that. But the bucket style is probably the best style, is the most rugged, so that have to be said. This is a dual overhead cam engine. Does have two variable valve timing, or both intake and exhaust, and just like any Ford in the past, I hope they are slowly moving away from that. They have the oil control valves that go through the valve cover, just sit right on top. Guess they're easy to access in this particular engine. It's pretty interesting design. Only Ford does that. Moving away from that, this is an all aluminum engine, so aluminum cylinder head, aluminum block. This has a single timing chain that goes from the cams to the crank with an internal tensioner, and the oil pump is driven directly by the crankshaft. This engine does have EGR. This is how they can keep going with this. It's all the way on the passenger side. You do have the EGR valve and the cooler and the whole 9 yards. This engine is direct injected only. The high pressure fuel pump does sit on the valve cover in the back. It does have 4 direct injectors underneath the intake. Everything is simple there. This does not have port injection and direct injection like the V6. This is the only reference we'll talk about. So carbon buildup is very possible with this engine. That is one of the things about it. Cooling system here is very simple. You have something you'll notice with this engine bay, a lot of room. I mean, the water pump is right there. Tensioner for the belt, right there. Super simple to work on, and that is something really cool. Now, something that changed from the previous generation, you do not have a mechanical fan. You have 2 electric fans, which is actually a welcome change. I think they are more efficient than kind of simpler for service. You have all the space wide open. This engine is a turbocharged engine. It does have a single turbocharger, and it's medium size, kind of a little bit on the bigger size from what you expect from a 4-cylinder, but this does have oil and coolant cooled system. It does have an electronic wastegate. It does have an air-to-air intercooler, so you have piping going all the way to the front and back. Now, the transmission here is a 10-speed automatic transmission, regular good old torque converter automatic transmission. It is a smooth transmission. However, this engine is not very smooth. Let's talk about it. So this engine is a little bit on the underpowered side. Even though numbers-wise it looks decent, but is not the most refined engine in the planet. It is an older design. Yes, it's a carryover and whatnot, but it is not the smoothest engine in the planet. And the biggest complaint about this engine is when you're stopping at a traffic light, it shakes the whole cab. That's the only concern about it. I mean, it feels labored, feels pushed, and that push and reliability don't get along very well. Now, some observations around here. Certain things I really like the electric fans. That is a welcome change. The other stuff that are very interesting is the interesting choice of plastics and one-time use clamps, of course. So on the one hand, you have this beautiful metal coolant pipe, just sits right at the top, proper hose going to it with a clamp. I mean, the thing looks like a museum piece for mechanics. It's a metal pipe. What is going wrong with it? Nothing. Then right next to it, you have a barrage of plastic coolant connectors with one-time clamp. And then my favorite one, there's a one-time use clamp in the middle of a hose. I don't know what exactly it does. Hopefully it does something, but Then the plastics everywhere for the vapor emission system and things clipping here in the PCV system. I don't know why manufacturers do that. Just use a hose, clamp, we're good. Simple as that. They love this quick disconnect stuff. This is the stuff that don't last. Another observation here is there's a lot of space in this engine. Again, we were supposed to have a V6 here. We could have a V6 here. So you got a lot of room around it, and that is nice. With the lack of a mechanical fan, the front is very accessible, the sides are very accessible, everything is super accessible, and that is pretty cool. Now, a couple of little things. The fenders are wide open. They don't have any kind of covers here. That's just how they did it. And if you look on the other side, you have the washer bottle, and you see it's a very interesting design, how they made it super big, super wide, just to fit it in that little cavity. And because there's no covers, you can actually see that. I thought that was pretty cool. Let's take a look underneath the 2024 Ford Ranger. Starting with, we got two hooks. That's pretty cool. They're exposed. They're not hidden or somewhere. They're right there. Coming out in the front here, everything is covered with plastic. These are not heavy-duty shields or anything, which is, in my opinion, I mean, sometimes they put the metal shields. Do you really need them? That's the question. The only thing that is hanging low is the front diff. Not terribly low. I mean, it's still at the lower level than the frame, but that's the only thing. Let's look at the front suspension here. Lower control arm is aluminum, upper control arm is aluminum, everything is aluminum here. Now, interesting thing with this style of trucks, you're gonna get a centrics adjustment for your alignment. Ball joint is lower ball joint is part of the control arm, upper ball joint is also part of the control arm. Wish they would do that a little bit differently. Now, everything being aluminum here, folks will look at this as good, but the problem with aluminum in trucks, strength. That's the one thing, and then the bearing will essentially weld itself to the knuckle here. That is, the strut here sits on the lower control arm, sits on the frame at the top. This is pretty simple setup that we've seen with a lot of trucks. Dual piston caliper in the front, and right next to it is a plastic sway bar link. I wish they would not do stuff like that, but they do. Now the exhaust, this is a 4-cylinder, of course. You notice that the catalytic converter is here. It's all the way up. So that is a pretty good spot for it, away from everything. Exhaust quality with Fords is not always the best, and this is an example of that. You do have a flex pipe here. Now this is the transmission. It is a plastic pan. But the good news is, and this is something Ford have used, the oil pan, which you can kind of sort of see it from here, a little bit here. It is aluminum, which is not plastic, which is nice. Now this frame is fully boxed, not a C frame, so that is nice to see. Interestingly, if you look at the body, it doesn't really have a lot of insulation, a little bit here, but the rest of it is wide open. Kind of interesting because this, we'll talk about it a little bit later in the video. It's pretty smooth ride and decently refined for a truck. I mean, this is a truck, it's not meant to be a luxury car. Then we get to the interesting stuff. Yeah, it's a brand new truck. They're not painted. I don't know why the manufacturers do this, but they do, and that's okay. And then the other thing that they do, they leave you these voids where salt will go in here and collect and rot the entire thing. That's just the other problem. And of course, the frame is fully open, not a single plug on this frame. So if you live in a salty area, you might want to undercoat this guy because, yeah. Fuel tank is right here. It's kind of on the side. Doesn't look like a huge fuel tank, but it's pretty standard on a truck of this segment. Going to the back, leaf springs. Very interesting to see that in 2024, a model that just came out in 24, at least in the US, other parts of the world, it's been around for a while. But it's only 2 leaves. I wish there was a few more leaves. That would have been nice, but 2 leaves. Rear end is right here. It's a live rear end. Pretty interesting. This is a style, so if you look at something like Toyota, they'll have a different style where the carrier comes off. This one, you have a cover here, and you remove the cover, and that's where the differential is. Small thing with Ford, and I'm noticing some of the domestics will do that. You notice there is a fill plug. Where is my drain plug? Well, actually, they want you to remove the entire thing to drain the fluid and to replace the gasket. I don't know why they do that. I mean, a little plug somewhere in this area would have been nice. I mean, I notice here, if you come look here, I mean, you have this, it almost looks like it's a machine to have a plug here to drain it, although it's not the lowest point, but still. I don't know why they do that. That's just how they've always done it. Now, spare tire, proper, actually steel wheel spare tire, which is pretty cool. Now, something I really like about this, and I wish other trucks would do this. This is a trailer hitch, but you notice it is bolted to the frame. It is not part of the frame. So should anything happen to it, damage, whatnot, you can actually replace it separate from the frame. So if somebody crashes into this truck, yeah, you might tweak the mounting points. You can kind of bring them back, but you're not technically having frame damage immediately. Some trucks will have this part of the frame, and that's how they did it. So single exhaust comes out of the side. I do like that this area is covered not only by the step, which is here, but if you look at the bed, it's actually closed up. The opening is all the way at the end, and you can barely see it. Same thing on the other side. I guess what is covering the opening of the bed is this step. It's not 100% covered, but hey, we'll take something over nothing. And lastly, a couple things. Single piston caliper in the back with integrated electronic parking brake. And something else that is interesting, the brackets here for the U-bolts, they're aluminum. Would love to have these as steel. Maybe that's just me, but they're aluminum. Let's take a look at the outside of the Ford Ranger. As soon as we said, let's take a look at the outside, the lights went off. So, something about this truck that is very interesting. We're going to talk about it a little bit more down the video. It has a very European truck look, or pickup. Now, they don't really call them trucks, which does look decent. If you look at the previous ones, I mean, they're all right, but they're not really styled, if you would. But this one does have a good look. Two headlights separate. You do have this big LED around here. It does have a very utilitarian look, like not a good looking truck, but it's a truck. Big Ford logo in the middle right here. It's pretty interesting. But if you look at the profile of the hood, certain things about it gives us a European cue. That has a reason, actually, but this is an interesting look. Not something you expect to see from a Ranger if you look at the previous generations. Looking at the side here, this is your biggest telltale sign. This truck was not meant for the US market. I mean, this is an American company with a complete last-minute add-on side markers to be US compliant. That's your biggest telltale sign. This was not designed in the US for the US market. Moving away from that, the side profile is very basic. There isn't really much going on. Decent wheels. They are chrome for this Lariat edition. They do write Lariat right here in this very flimsy piece of plastic, which is a little bit better quality. Now the mirrors, very interesting mirrors. They're large. I really like the mirrors. They're large and they're wide. The visibility out of these is great. Really like that. Now the lock-unlock situation, I'm going to call it a situation. It's only in the front, which is understandable. But this is actually not a button. It's kind of like a touch capacitive deal. It's pretty interesting to see that. Now these side steps, obviously they're optional. They're not something you're kind of stuck with the trim. They're useless. Just say that. They're very small, but then if you bypass them, you're going to hit your leg here every time you get in. Sure, it's a little bit bigger, make it more useful. Going around back here though, this window opens, power. Again, this is a higher trim, so to be expected. Third brake light on the US model is all the way at the top of the cab. And this was also another add-on. Nice thing is they gave you these steps on both sides, which is pretty cool. I think that's a really nice feature, so you can get into the bed easily. The blind spot monitor is in the taillight, not down in the bumper. A lot of trucks will have it down in the bumper. This one is integrated in the taillight. Back here, it just says Ranger and the Ford logo, which is extremely oversized. That's about it. Doesn't say much, and that is pretty cool. Just kept it simple. Now here you have your trailer hitch connections. The cool thing is, this is an actual, I don't recall what they call it, the trailer hitch connection, but this has brake controller, which is pretty cool. We're starting to see that in this segment. Before, that was not a thing in this segment. Let's take a look at the bed. Few things that I really like about this bed. Now, this is where you tell Ford makes trucks, and they know how to make trucks that actually work. Couple things. First, you have these openings where you can hook a clamp, and you can see it's clearly showing you an image of a clamp. Same thing on the other side. You have another one right here. But more so, if you have a tape measure here, pretty interesting to see that. And little stuff like that, very easy to do, but you can tell who they were thinking of when they made this truck. Other thing is, you notice the shock that makes the soft open. It's actually external, not internal. Most trucks will have these. This is how the soft open thing will be, but they'll be internal, and there'll be two of them. This one has one, so you notice when I let it go, it still slams at the end. That's the one thing. You do have these big straps here. For some reason they are red, maybe for visibility or something. But more stuff here. You do have your tie downs, pretty standard, but you have a household outlet, and then you have a 12-volt outlet. This is really cool to have here, very functional. Really like that. And with that, there is one more thing. This is the only bed configuration you can get for this truck in the US for reasons unknown to me. I mean, we are the country that really uses trucks, are into trucks. We only have a 5-foot bed. There's no more 6-foot bed. Talk about that a little bit later in the video. And the last thing, which is kind of a relic, Ford still has this little useless thing. I mean, with digital key and all the advancement in technology with keys, we still have the number thing. It's just, that completely feels like a total add-on for the US model. Let's take a look at the interior of the 2024 Ford Ranger. Mind you, even though they didn't give us an exact price on this particular test one, but we configured one similar, it came up to over $50,000. So that's a lot of money for a truck. The one thing I will say is they at least attempted to make it nice, and they did. There's this nice material in the dash, and over here, not the whole dash, but part of it. That's okay. Seats are nice. I don't think they are real leather, but it does have this nice pattern on it. Just feels like they did something, and that is nice. Now, the infotainment screen is this giant screen here. It is decently optioned, which is nice. It does work well. Although in our testing we did have the typical infotainment glitches, so there is that. Underneath that though, you have the volume control. You do have some of your HVAC controls that are physical. Some of them are in the screen, but they are always visible, so at least there is that. But there's something I like about this truck, is that even though this is a higher trim, it's meant to be the luxury model and all that, they still give you a lot of useful features. For example, you have this shelf here, you have a glove box at the top, although it's not big, but still, and then you have another glove box at the bottom. That is useful stuff. There is decent storage in the center console. There is these openings here, and there's a wireless charger. It just feels like there's a lot of storage that you could use for your day-to-day, and that is pretty cool. But possibly the biggest thing about this interior that is a big plus is how smooth this ride is. I mean, this truck has leaf springs, as we just looked at. This is very smooth for a truck that has leaf springs, and that, they really refined it. Suspension is very refined. The only thing that intrudes on that is as soon as you come to a stop, the engine will shake the entire truck. Unless you let it go in auto start stop. but then every time it comes out of it, it'll shake the entire truck to come on. That is the only thing that intrudes on the interior. And then the road noise and the quietness of this interior. It's not the quietest interior in the world, but for this segment of trucks, it's actually not bad. And that is a welcome change. I mean, we looked underneath it, there was hardly any insulation, but the thing is decently insulated, and I like that. This is really cool. Now the gauges is a screen. It's a big screen that shows you everything. Doesn't have a lot of features. It's interesting that the RPM kind of shows you in 1.2, 1.3. That was kind of an interesting thing, but does show you some gauges, although you can't customize all of them, but you can customize some of them, so I suppose there is that. Steering wheel is very simple to operate. All the controls are very simple. Shifter, although this is technically not a mechanical shifter, but it does, you press it, it does have the normal feel of a normal shifter. It's not some rotary dial, something annoying, which is nice. And of course, this particular truck is four-wheel drive, so you do have your four-wheel drive control, but interestingly, there are buttons, and you have this big rotary dial. That's actually the drive mode. The 4 high, 4 low are buttons, and 2 high. That's how they did it. And the other interesting thing is this has brake controller, which is something that's starting in this segment of trucks. That is really nice. It's actually a nice brake controller. It shows you a lot of information when you activate it, and you can even save your trailer. You can save a trailer and whatnot. These are nice features because this truck can tow in specific configurations up to 7,500 pounds, which is pretty good for a truck of this size. Let's take a look at the back seat of the Ford Ranger. I'm 5'7", this is my driving position. I have decent knee room, and that is because if you notice the seat has like kind of an indent in the middle. They're trying to give you maximum leg space here, which is nice. The seats are comfortable. The only concern I have with them is your kind of leg angle here. There's a space here, so they're not the most comfortable seats in the world for adults long term, but again, it's a truck. It's not about comfort and family and whatnot. The nice thing is though, you do have storage, you do have a household power outlet here, you do have USB-C, USB-A, so they gave you some stuff in the back, which is nice. Now, because this is a truck, you are usually used to this folding down and this folding up to have more storage, but the first thing is, you have this pull strap that pulls the entire seat. It's not split. You really don't have any storage here per se. It isn't much. And then if you lift the seat, it also is one piece. You do have very little storage under the seat. Some other models will have a little bit better storage here, but this is all you get. Let's talk about some things I do not like about the 2024 Ford Ranger. Starting with this particular engine, the 2.3 liter EcoBoost. It is very buzzy, it is very underpowered, and it shakes the whole truck when you stop. Doesn't feel very refined. That is one thing about it. And occasionally, in certain driving conditions, you'll accelerate and kind of buck the whole truck because it's so underpowered until the turbo spools up. Just doesn't feel natural. In all fairness, we have not tested a V6 yet. Maybe that is better, but this particular one, just be ready. It is not very refined. The other thing is, there is a lack of configurations. You only have one cab configuration and one bed configuration. Long gone is the 6-foot bed that you used to get in the previous generation, although in other markets, you do get them with different cabs, different configurations. So I don't know what happened there. And prices are on the rise. I mean, things are getting very expensive with trucks. This, not as tested, they did not give us a price on this particular one, but we optioned one to a similar level. You're well over $50,000, and for that price, this does start to not be a very good deal because now you're deep into the territory of the F-150. Understandably so. They don't have a very low trim with very black bumpers and whatnot because then it competes with the Maverick. But the same thing can be said about the Maverick. Or if you're going to option out a Maverick, might as well buy a Ranger. If you're going to option out a Ranger, might as well buy an F-150. Do you see what's going on here when we all of a sudden decide to raise prices on trucks? I get it, inflation and everything, but things is too expensive. And for lack of configurations, I think that's going to be a problem. So that is the 2024 Ford Ranger. See, the Ranger name has been around in the US for a while. It's a very popular truck. This segment of trucks they're smaller, they're easier to park, you can navigate around a busy city with them, and they're very utilitarian. One thing Ford does really well, their trucks are usually really meant to be work trucks. And you see certain features, it's like, this is a no-nonsense truck that works really well, and that's what they really do well. This one carries all these traits. You see the stuff in the bed, see some of the stuff in the interior. It's not all over the place. However, there's one thing that we mentioned when we looked at the outside. This has a European look, and I feel like they initially decided we don't want to bring the Ranger in the US, even though the US is one of the biggest places for trucks, because this truck just got updated for 2024 in the US, but it's been out for a little bit of time in other markets. And other markets get a lot more configurations. Single cab, double cab, 6-foot bed. We don't get any of that. We just get one configuration. And same thing with engine options. You get a carryover engine from the previous generation and the V6. Now, in all fairness, we did not test the V6, so we're only going to comment on the 4-cylinder. The 4-cylinder engine is probably the biggest letdown of this. I mean, this is such a smooth truck. The minute you get in it, it's a leaf spring truck. So you get kind of the strength of the leaf spring and you get a smooth ride. I mean, it is very smooth compared to other trucks. Even with springs in the back, this is rivaling that. And it has leaf springs. That is a very nice thing. But that nice thing completely goes away when you stop at a traffic light and the engine just shakes the entire car. It is a very sluggish engine. It's not smooth, not refined, and that is the kind of the letdown with this particular model with the 2.3 liter EcoBoost. Other than this, I wish they would bring more configurations. They know best. They probably see no demand for it, but a 6-foot bed would be nice. Different cab configurations would be nice. Maybe a diesel, some of the diesels from overseas, or a plug-in hybrid that they have overseas. We don't have that. Overall, this is a pretty nice truck. In this particular high trim, you do get some amenities, and it is done well, better than the Maverick, I think, in the higher trims. But a couple things that potentially stand in the way is long-term reliability. Usually these are, Ford is not the top of reliability overall. They're not bad, but they're not great either. Second thing is, things are getting expensive. Not just the Ranger. All trucks are getting extremely expensive. This one is tested, although Ford did not give us an exact price, but we tried to build one just like it. You're north of $50,000 for a truck that you don't really have a lot of customizations. You have leaf springs in the back, although it's smooth, but still. You have a 4-cylinder that is very buzzy and rattly and shaky. And a carryover, not really a new technology, so that's where things kind of, does Ford not want a Ranger in the US and they just brought it just because? That's how it feels like almost. Still a good truck, still has all the good traits that Ford does in trucks, but it just feels like we're kind of getting, we're the last to the party. That's how it feels like. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some other videos. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.